Hello and welcome back to Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. Today you can see behind me a synagogue in Norwich. Now this is a different type of synagogue than the one we're going to look at later because this is a Reformed synagogue. A Reformed synagogue is one where men and women sit together, and you can see that in the image behind me. Today, however, we're going to think about a more traditional approach to synagogue worship, and we're going to look at what happens within a synagogue as well. Thank you for that. So, without any further ado, here is our introductory sequence. Okay, so here you can see a Orthodox synagogue. I'd like you to just have a think. What do you recognize in this synagogue? What can you already name with their specialist terms? So have a look now, maybe text a friend, send a WhatsApp message and say, hey, I'm doing this RE revision with Mr. Shelton on YouTube. This is what I can see in a synagogue. Fantastic. Okay, so I wonder how many of those things that you did identify. Hopefully later in the lesson you will be able to clearly say what some of these things are. You will need access to the information sheet, which is available in my description. You're able to draw the diagram as we go and make notes, but there is a help guide there if you wanted it. So this is our objective for today. Okay, we're going to explore the features within a synagogue. So our title today is What to Expect to See inside a synagogue. So if you get that written down, please, what to expect to see inside a synagogue. And our literacy objective is to develop our use of religious keywords. As always, feel free to pause this clip and come back to it if there's anything you missed, because I'm going to be going through this fairly quickly. Our outcomes today is a good outcome would be if you can explain the main features of a Jewish synagogue. It would be great if you can start to explain how the synagogue helps worship and what Jews wear when they're there. We'll do another lesson in a couple of lessons time about things that Jews wear. And even better if you can sequence what the synagogue is and what it means and how it helps Jews worship God as well. So during today's session we're going to look at information in the synagogue plan after watching a media clip. There's going to be an exam question for you to answer. It's only a short one, but it will get you started to think about things that you would need in an examination answer. Then we're going to review what we've just done as well. So to start with, I found this on YouTube. It is a Holy Cribs introduction to a synagogue. So a random YouTube clip, but it's not so random because it fits in perfectly. Over to you, go.
Hello there, TrueTube. Welcome to the New London Synagogue. Come in. My name's Natasha. I'm going to be showing you around the New London Synagogue. But before we go into the main sanctuary, I need you to please cover your heads. This is a kippah. Traditionally, men in Judaism cover their heads as a way to show respect for God. Women also cover their heads, usually as a sign to show that they're married, but sometimes in the modern day, women also cover their heads for religious purposes. This is called a siddur, or a prayer book. It has all of the prayers that we will be doing throughout the week. We pray in Hebrew, but it also gives an English translation. This is called a Chumash, and it has all of the passages that we will be reading from the Torah, the Jewish holy book, in the service. Usually, a Jewish house of prayer is called a synagogue. This word is Greek, and it means assembly. I personally am more likely to call it shul, which is from the German word for school, because a synagogue is not just a place that we come To assemble is also a place we come to learn. In Hebrew, we might call it a Beit Knesset, a house of assembly, or a Beit Tefillah, which means a house of prayer. So come through with me to the main sanctuary. This is the room where most of our prayer services are held. This is a traditional synagogue, so men and women sit separately. We can see up here the women's gallery, where the women sit. And there's also a section to our left here, where women will sit. And the men will sit in this section down here. Men and women sit separately in Jewish services as to not distract each other, so that we can focus on the service itself. Everyone in the service sits facing Jerusalem. This is because Jerusalem is the holy city in Judaism, and it's the city in which the temple used to stand. This is my usual seat. I come here for worship services on Shabbat. Shabbat is the Jewish holy day, which starts on Friday night and ends on Saturday night because Jewish days begin in the evening. Shabbat is a special day in Judaism. It's a day of rest. We take this to mean not only that we can't go to our places of work, but that we can't do creative or destructive work. So for example, we can't write because that's creative, and we also can't rub out what's already been written because that's destructive. Another thing that we can't do on Shabbat is take public transport or drive. That means that we have to walk to synagogue. I live an hour away from my synagogue walking, which means I have to do 2 hours of walking every Shabbat. Another thing that we can't do on Shabbat is carry. So anything that I'm going to want during the service needs to already be at the synagogue. That's why I keep my talit in my seat. The talit traditionally is worn by men, and men are obligated to wear it every day as they pray. However, women are not obligated, but some women choose to wear it anyway. A talit is a prayer shawl. We wear them during morning prayers throughout the week as well as on Shabbat. What's important about a talit is not the actual material, but rather these. These are tzitzit, or fringes. We put them on the corners of our talit and we wear them when we pray. They're supposed to represent the 613 commandments within the Torah. This platform is what we call the bima. It's where we read the Torah during the service. In Jerusalem, until about 2,000 years ago, there used to be a temple standing. This was where the majority of Jewish life took place. But as of 2,000 years ago, the temple has been destroyed and the synagogue has taken the place of the centre of prayer for Jews. Because of this, many things in the synagogue are here to symbolise what would have been in the temple. This is what some people would know as a menorah. Actually, it's called a Chanukiah, and it's slightly different to a menorah because a menorah only has 7 candlesticks or 7 lamps, whereas a Chanukiah has 9. The menorah was what was standing in the temple, which is what this is supposed to symbolise. But we use a Chanukiah on Hanukkah, the festival of lights. This is a ner tamid, or an eternal light. It's supposed to symbolise the eternal light that would have been in the temple, but also to symbolise God's relationship with the world and with the people of Israel. The ner tamid is in the shape of a Star of David. This is the main symbol of Judaism. This symbol, which I'm also wearing, it's supposed to be the shape of King David of ancient Israel's shield. Up the top here are 2 tablets. These are the tablets of the 10 Commandments, or as Jews tend to call them, the 10 sayings. These particular 10 sayings are commandments that were given by God to Moses. This is the most important part of the synagogue. This is the ark where we keep the Torah scrolls. These are what we call Sifrei Torah, or Torah scrolls. Each one of these is the same and has the 5 books of Moses within them. We have many of them because we use them in different services and at different points during the week, so they need to be set to different places. The Torah is very important to Jews, and so we treat it almost like it's a person. As you can see here, We've dressed it in what we call a mantle. We've also put on it a breastplate. This symbolises also what the priests would have been wearing in the temple period. And on the top, we have what we call rimonim. The most important part of the service is when the Torah is read. The Torah will be taken out of this ark, taken around the congregation so that everyone can come close to it, and then put on this reading desk. It's written in Hebrew, and Jews believe that it was given to Moses by God. When reading this to a congregation, we use something called a yad. Yad means hand, as you can see by the hand on the end of the pointer. The yad is used to read the Torah so that we don't have to touch it directly with our fingers. This keeps it from being damaged. And when reading the Torah to the congregation, there will be several people standing around the bimah to help undress the Torah and also to make sure that we don't read it incorrectly. There is a tradition of singing the Torah instead of just reading it. This both beautifies the Torah and it lets us know where the punctuation is, where sentences end. After the Torah service, when the Torah has been walked around the congregation again and put away, the rabbi will give his sermon. The rabbi is the leader of the congregation. Rabbi means teacher, so the rabbi's main job is to teach us. And also if we have questions about Jewish law, we go to the rabbi. The prayers during the service will be led by somebody called a chazan, or cantor. The chazan sings the prayers and leads the congregation in singing. When the rabbi is teaching the congregation, he'll be facing us, but when the chazan is leading prayer, he faces the same direction as the rest of the community, towards Jerusalem. This is the women's gallery. As you can see from the decorations, we have lots of pictures of leaves and flowers and vines around the synagogue, but we don't have any pictures of people. This is because when Judaism first began, people were worshipping statues, and the Jewish people wanted to separate themselves from the other tribes. Another way that the tribe of Israel was different to the other tribes is that the Jewish people worship one unseen God. Because we're a traditional service, only men can participate actively, that is, leading prayers or reading from the Torah. But this synagogue is different to many other very traditional synagogues because we count women in what we call a minyan. A minyan is how many Jews we need to do certain prayers. Traditionally this was 10 Jewish men, but in this synagogue we count men and women. Another mitzvah or commandment that some women choose to do that we're not obligated to is wearing tefillin. Tefillin are 2 black boxes that we wear during morning prayers during the week. This is because in the Torah it tells us that we shall wear the words on our arms and on our heads. This means spiritually that we're supposed to take the words of the Torah with us wherever we go, but we also physically wear them during our morning prayers. Inside these boxes are tiny little scrolls with words of Torah on them. Thank you for coming, TrueTube. I hope you enjoyed your visit to the New London Synagogue. Shavua Tov. Have a good week. Shavua Tov.
Perfect. So what you need now is you're going to be drawing out this diagram that is behind my head, or if you've got the information sheet, you can add things to that diagram as we go. And the idea is that you label it as we discover what each of the things are. So you're going to need at least half a page to draw this diagram out, and so you can write around it as well. I'm also going to pose you some questions to answer underneath. So to start with, this is an outside of a synagogue. You can see that they're not designed like churches, that you can notice immediately that that's what they are, because Jewish people quite often try to disguise their buildings, which is a little bit of a legacy from the Second World War. when they were picked on and persecuted for their faith, and that's happened throughout many, many years of history, as well as just that one horrible event. So the building in Judaism that they worship God in is called a synagogue or a shul, and that's German, obviously, for the word school. Synagogue is another term for a place of assembly, an assembly being a place to gather people. So what I'd like you to do, please, I'd like you now to answer that question, which is, what do you think the two main purposes of the Jewish place of worship are? Either write the question out and then answer shortly, or answer in full sentences. I'll pause for a few moments while you get that done. Okay, so the first thing that you'll notice inside an Orthodox synagogue, which is what we're looking at today, is that there's two layers to it. There's an upstairs and a downstairs. The upstairs is where the women sit, and the downstairs is where the men sit. The women quite often sit separately from the men because the men say that the women distract them. Okay, you make those judgments as you need. Now, in terms of children, quite often the children do sit with the women, but sometimes Jewish boys would sit downstairs as well. So the first thing you need to draw is the outside box, which I've got in black there, and label it as women upstairs. Since we know the women are upstairs, downstairs the men sit. Again, if you can now draw some little lines, those lines represent pews. Pews are wooden benches. Quite a few churches will have had pews, so you've got probably some idea what I'm talking about. But it is the men that sit downstairs, as I say. So we just add that to our diagram and label that as we go. Brilliant. So there's 3 questions here for you to answer in your books. Question 2 is, what are the seating arrangements in a synagogue? Question 3, why do you think that women and men sit separately from each other? And question 4 is, do you think this is a good or a bad idea? Now, this is an Orthodox synagogue. Obviously, the example we started looking at today was a Reform synagogue, and therefore men and women would sit together. But for the example of an Orthodox synagogue, which is the more strict one, do you think it's a good or a bad idea that men and women sit separately, and why? The next thing to add to our diagram is the little black cube that I put in the middle. This is the beamer. This is the reading platform. This is where the rabbi, the Jewish teacher, will bring the scrolls out the ark. No, not Noah and the ark. A different kind of ark we'll come on to in a few moments. And he'll bring them there, and they'll open the Sefer Torah out, the Torah scrolls out, and then they will read from that. And it is right in the middle of where the men sit, because it's the visual time that the men are involved with the service at the most. Sometimes someone might be asked to come up and read, but normally a cantor, which is the person who is able to read the scriptures fluently, would come in and make the reading on behalf of the community, and then the rabbi, the teacher, would then explain what that reading means. So then there's 2 questions for you to answer. Question 5 is, what's the beamer used for? And question 6 is, why is the beamer similar to the pulpit in the church, or the Church of England church, lectern in the Roman Catholic churches, and the minbar in a mosque? Why is it similar to those things? Again, pause this clip so you can then answer that well. The next thing to add to our diagram, you'll see it in front of the black cube, in front of the beamer, is the little dot, and this is the Ner Tamid. Now, the Ner Tamid is a Hebrew term for the word everlasting light. Remember, Jews speak Hebrew, so you've learned some Hebrew today. So the Ner Tamid is a candle which is suspended from the ceiling, or a light that never goes out, and it represents the eternal presence of God within the synagogue. So that leads us nicely on to our question 7, which is, the words Ner Tamid are Hebrew for the words, and then I'd like you to complete that. Okay, so we get to the holiest part of the synagogue now, which is the Ark. The Ark is where the Sefer Torah are kept, the Torah being the first 5 books of Moses, the first part of the Tanakh, as we thought about last time. Now, the Jewish scriptures then is called the Torah, or that's, as I say, the first part of the Tanakh, but they are the most special part. They're in a scroll form, and they're called the Sefer Torah, and they're all handwritten. Now, they're placed in the ark when they're not being used, and taken to the beamer when they're being read, but all the arks face the city of Jerusalem. So when people come into the synagogue and they're facing that direction, every Jewish person is facing Jerusalem. So we're just going to add that blue blob as I've drawn it onto your diagrams and label that as the ark. Okay, so what I now need you to do, please, is to copy and fill out the blanks of this. It is question 8. Jews keep the scrolls called the something something in the ark. The ark is at the front of the synagogue and shows people the direction of something, their holiest city. Okay, so either side of the ark then are the 10 Commandments. These are at the front, sometimes they're by the door though, and these are 10 of the special mitzvot, the special laws which were given to Moses at Mount Sinai. And these are 10 important rules that Jews live by. So again, if you draw, you see it either side of the ark there are 2 little lines. If you draw those and label those as the 10 Commandments, they're generally split number 1 to 4 and then 5 to 10 on the other. That's simply because 1 to 4 are about relationship with God and 5 to 10 are about relationship with others. Also in the synagogue, I've got down here at the front of the one that I was planning with, there are 2 prayers as well. One prayer will always be for the leaders of the country the synagogue is in, and the other one will be for the nation of Israel. So these are really important prayers because it shows that Jews are both rooted in the country that they're in, but also they hold this special significance of Israel. Okay, so now you've done that, there are a little fill in the blanks exercise here for you to write out again in your books or use the information sheet if that's what you've been working on. So there are blank prayers written on the front of the walls of the synagogue. One is for the nation of blank and the other is for the blank the synagogue is in. The other thing at the front are the blank commandments. So how many are those? So this lesson then, we said a good outcome would be if you could explain the main features of a Jewish synagogue. Great if you could start to explain how the synagogue helped what Jews worship, so it helps them focus on God and what Jews wear when they're there. And even better if you can sequence what the synagogue is and how it helps Jews worship. Obviously, so this lesson then, we said a good outcome would be if you could explain the main features of a Jewish synagogue. Great if you could start to explain how the synagogue helped what Jews worship, so it helps them focus on God and what Jews wear when they're there. And even better if you can sequence what the synagogue is and how it helps Jews worship. Obviously, the Holy Crypt was quite useful for that second objective there, but we are going to come back to that in a further lesson. So coming on to our final activity, I'd like you to answer this question in your notes, which is to explain how synagogues show Jewish belief. So what do they show about belief in God, and how do they show it is basically what that question is asking about. This is your success criteria. Okay, if it was out of 8, these are things that I'm going to be asking you to think about. Is there any religious terms? So have you used the words like bima or ark or ner tamid? And have you spelt them correctly? If you have, then that's going to be gaining you at least 4 marks. Is there any depth to your answer? Have you talked about the way that those things help faith? So have you talked about what the ner tamid symbolizes or what the Sefer Torah reminds the Jews of? And then finally, is it fully explained? That's how you do to get your 8 marks. So I'm going to flick back to the question. And if you want to pause this clip and give it an answer now, and then we'll come back to how you would mark it again. Well done, and this is how it would be marked. Okay, so you might want to score yourself now and then say something you think you would need to improve on next time. So returning back to our first activity, this was the image that we saw at the start. I would like you now to say what you see and see if you can use any specialist terms. Okay, did you see the ner tamid hanging up at the top? It's a little pink dot that isn't on this image. Did you talk about the Sefer Torah and the ark, the bima? Did you talk about the pews? Did you talk about the women sitting upstairs, the men sitting downstairs? I think they're sort of the main things that you can see in this. However, you may have spotted some things that I've not identified as well. That's it for today. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you're well. Stay safe. Wash hands. God bless. And I'll see you in a few days' time.